You're listening to The Bold Blueprint with Claire Bartlett. This is the go-to podcast for business owners who are ready to be bold, step into your power and claim the success that you deserve. So whether you're an established business or just starting out, this podcast is your weekly dose of unapologetic inspiration, empowerment, and actionable advice to take your business to the next level. So whether it's the highs, the lows, or everything in between, I'm here to help you build a business that reflects who you truly are. It's time to break the mold and build a business that thrives on your terms. Today's episode is brought to you by Xero Accounting Software, a champion of small businesses and a proud sponsor of the Bold Blueprint podcast. Managing your business finances can feel overwhelming, but Xero simplifies it all and gives you the power to keep your books in order and your mind on growth. Xero have amazingly offered a 50% discount off your first 3 months with them. So if you'd like to take advantage of this amazing deal, just follow the link in the show notes. But for now, let's jump into this week's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Bold Blueprint. I'm Claire Bartlett, your host, and today I'm going to be talking to you all about podcasting for business, why you should think about having one, what are the top tips I would give you if you are considering setting up a podcast, and what it's meant for my business since launching this podcast nearly a year ago now. So first of all, one hands up, how many of you, just like I did, have been considering and toying with the idea of setting up a podcast for ages, but just felt overwhelmed or, it's completely out of your comfort zone? The thing with me was the technology. I was so nervous about, how much work was going to be involved, what technology I would need to use. And really, I thought it was going to be a massive drain on my time, which is what held me off for so long in launching this podcast. If you've been following me for a while, you'll know that this podcast is almost 1 year old now. And I honestly can tell you it's one of my most favourite parts of my business. I'm so glad that I finally took that leap of faith and just dived in and gave it a go. And the conversations that I've had, the things that I have learned, but also the things that I've been able to share with my audience, it's so rewarding. And then, of course, there's the financial gains from it as well. So to start us off today, I just want to talk through why you should be considering it if you haven't already. Well, there are 5 million podcasts globally. Okay, now that sounds like a really massively flooded market and one that you should probably stay clear of. But what if I told you that actually only 700,000 of those are actually active? Then that in the entire world does not seem like that flooded a market. It's a really, really great tool to use for your business because people are listening to more and more podcasts every day. It's becoming the new way that we digest our content. We can do it on the fly while we're driving our kids to club or to school, while we're on our long journeys, commutes to work. It's a really easy way to digest information, and it's a lovely way to connect on a one-to-one level with your audience. There's also the engagement rates. Now, most of the time today, there's been a huge push on email lists. This has been the way that we should all be growing our audience. And don't get me wrong, there is a massive place for email lists in your business. You should definitely be spending time generating that and growing that email list. But 78% of podcast listeners will always finish an episode. So that is an amazing engagement rate. When you are sending your emails out, we're really happy if you get sort of a 30 to 40% open rate. Well, this is over double that. 78% of your listeners would listen to the entire episode and stay with you and, want to be part of your journey. And another really amazing fact is that only 10% of podcasts make it past 10 episodes. So it really doesn't take a lot to be in the top 10 of all podcasts in the world, which will, of course, help you to stand out from the crowd, help give you authority. People can take you seriously. You are an expert in your field and you're sharing your knowledge with the world through the power of podcasts. So it really is something that you should start to consider. The benefits of having a podcast against all the other methods that you're likely already doing in your business. Like I've mentioned already, the email list with your social media, face-to-face networking. Well, podcasts can reach an audience that you wouldn't necessarily find on social media alone. They're people that haven't already discovered you. It's a really easy marketing tool for your business because people are searching for new podcasts constantly. And it doesn't have to be on a specific topic. I discuss all things to do with business, all things to wanting to grow a company, make success, earn money. All of these things are discussed within my podcast. So if anybody's looking for anything to do with any of those things that I've discussed previously, I will come up in their search. That's a lot easier to penetrate than it is on social media. It's a lot easier to stand out. It's helping you build that trust. It's sharing your voice. Now, there's this massive thing at the moment about all this know, like, and trust, getting your audience to get to know you, to build that like and that trust with them. And hearing your voice is a really powerful way of doing that. Because if they can see you, if they can hear you, it's going to connect on a much more personal level than just reading a static, social media post. So sharing your voice is really powerful. And also it's giving you that expert status, like I said, and it's giving you another, powerful lead generation tool in your business. It's another really amazing way to create versatile content. So one podcast episode can be repurposed so many times in your business. You can use it to create blogs for your website. You can cut it up and use it for social media posts. The things that if you're doing interviews, the things that your guests mention, that can be amazing inspiration for your social media content. So you spend 1 hour of your time recording one episode of the podcast, and then you can use that for like a month's worth of content. Honestly, it's such a rich source of content inspiration for your social media, which is another thing that we all really struggle with. The white paper syndrome, where you're just staring at a blank screen like, oh my God, what am I going to talk about this week or this month? Well, if you've got the podcast, it instantly helps you with that. So we've spoken all about why I should be doing it and what it's going to bring to my business, but how do you start? And this is the point, as I said at the beginning, that I was really stuck on for a long time. I really held myself back because I thought the process would be complicated, overwhelming. But what if I told you that actually it's one of the easiest parts of my business, which sounds crazy, right? But it is actually true. The first thing you need to do, though, is you need to plan it. You need to understand what the purpose of your podcast is. Is it to directly share your expertise with your audience? Is it to share a wealth of knowledge from a whole host of business owners? Is it purely just to entertain? Or is it to connect, make connections and use it as that sort of tool? When you understand what the purpose is, you then need to understand who you are targeting. Who is the audience that you are wanting to be listening to this podcast? You need to think about their needs and their interests. But also, most importantly, what are they wanting? Because so often it's very different what somebody needs in their business, but what they want in their business. And we don't go and look for what we need. As a society, we look for what we want. So people will be searching for how to make more money in my business or how to become successful, these sorts of things. They don't necessarily even know what they need to make that happen. So it's really important to understand how you're going to target that audience, who it is that you're speaking to, and then make the content applicable to them. Then you need to understand the format. Now, there's loads of different ways that you can have a podcast. You can have one that is just solo episodes. So it's constantly just you sharing your expertise, your experiences with the world. It can also be purely interviews. So you are always asking questions, speaking to other experts in their field, other hugely successful business owners, or whatever it is that the topic of your podcast. For me, I love to have a mix of both. But I didn't start off with a mix. My first series was solely interviews. And the reason for that, really, if I'm honest with myself, was confidence. I didn't know whether people would be interested in listening to me every week for, 30 to 40 minutes. I thought I needed the clout, I suppose, of having guest experts being interviewed. I thought that would bring me in a wider audience. It would be a great way to, entice people to come and listen to the podcast and sign up to subscribe to the podcast. And then in season 2 and 3, it's been a mixture. So I do still interview because I love having those conversations. I love hearing people's personal journeys in business, the lessons they've learned, and those golden nuggets that they share with the audience. So I absolutely do not want to drop the interview section from my podcast. But I also, I have a lot to say and I want to share it with the world. So I have also a great number of solo episodes that it's just something talking about something that I class myself as an expert in, or a personal journey that I've been through. And I think having that balance is working perfectly for me and my business and what I'm trying to achieve. But it's a personal decision. So it will be dependent on the type of podcast that you're wanting, what the purpose of your podcast, and who you are talking to. Then finally, the biggest question is how often you are going to release an episode. Now, consistency really is key with a podcast because you want to build that trust with people. You want to come along and be reliable. So I know that some of my favorite podcasts, they come out every, Friday, and I can look forward to that in the week. And I come to the Friday and I think, oh, great, I've got another episode of that I can listen to over the weekend. If I went and suddenly there wasn't one, they hadn't released one that Friday, it might turn me off that podcast altogether. I might think, oh, well, they've stopped releasing episodes. I need to go and find something else. So it is really important to be consistent and reliable in your posting, your releasing of episodes. But to do that, you need to choose a realistic schedule for you. I know some people, some of the really big podcast fish, Diary of a CEO, for example, they might release one every day. Well, I do not have the time or the team to allow me to release one every day. What I do have time for is doing one once a week. So for me, they go out every Wednesday morning. I know that you can build that easily into my timeframes and into my diary. Listeners can get used to that. They can look forward to that. They can subscribe to the channel and know that they're getting that every week without fail. So let's talk about the scary bit. What do you actually need to do a podcast? What technology do you need? How does the process work? Well, as I've mentioned, honestly, this felt like it was going to be a really long journey for me. And there was going to be so much that I would need to learn and so many new skills that I would need to adopt and spend time on. And honestly, it really wasn't that big a step, which really surprised me. So in the very beginning, I was thinking, well, the editing and all of those bits, I've never done that before, especially not to this level. Realistically, I'm probably going to need to outsource it. So in the beginning, I looked on Fiverr.com and there were so many people that can help you with this side of things. So if you really don't feel like you want to or are able to handle those sides of things, then there are amazing people out there that can help you. But after looking into those and testing a couple, I realised that actually for me and my business, it was something that I was able to achieve for myself and bring back in-house. So the very first thing that I did was I looked at what my equipment was. I had a pretty rubbish webcam that I'd bought through lockdown when Zoom became a thing. It was a bit grainy. The lighting wasn't that great. So I thought, well, I should probably upgrade that because even though I don't release the full videos every week, I do record the video so I can, create clips and show little graphics and things. So I did think I needed a camera. But then I realized, well, okay, if I'm not actually releasing the video, because I'd already decided that was something I could consider for the future, but it wasn't what I didn't want it to hold me back in the beginning. What is hugely important is the audio. Okay, a podcast is listened to, it's not watched. And actually, if you think back through, your experiences, you can watch something that's pretty low quality. It might be a bit grainy, a bit glitchy, but you can stomach that. But you can't listen. Well, I definitely can't listen to something that has really bad quality. I need it to be crisp and clear. It really frustrates me if I can't hear somebody or the sound quality differs. So I realised really early on, okay, well, the key thing that I needed to focus on was a microphone. I needed to get a really good professional microphone because up until that point, I'd pretty much only used, what came built in the laptop. That definitely is not ideal for a podcast. So the ones that I went for they're called Elgato. I've got the microphone, which is quite a fancy one. It's a very podcasty microphone. They're pretty reasonably priced. This was sort of very early in my business, so I didn't have thousands of pounds to be throwing at this. And also it's a gamble. It was a new thing that I was bringing into my business. So I went with Elgato. They're sort of a middle of the road brand, I suppose. There are definitely better and more expensive ones, but I absolutely love it. And the difference it made to my sound quality, my audio, was next level. So I got the Elgato with the Wave XLR, which is like a soundboard. And then I also did get an Elgato camera, which again has just been amazing for all the content that I create for my business. Next step was, okay, so I've got the audio sorted, I've got the camera, I know what the podcast is going to be about. How am I going to record the podcast? Now, there's loads of, realistically, any way that you can. So lots of people just use Zoom. You can literally record it as if you're hosting a meeting, record it there, it goes to your cloud, and you're done. I decided that if I was going to be doing the other steps myself, I needed a software that was purpose-built for podcasts. So I use a software called Riverside. It's pretty reasonably priced, but it enables me to have guests on there. I can really look at the audio and the settings in there, and I can also do some editing in there, some light editing. It also, which was a game changer, creates my show notes and my sound bites. It literally auto generates 60-second clips that you can use in your social media marketing. It takes screen grabs for you, so you've got pictures that you can use in your social media. So it does loads of the things for you automatically, which is so amazing, especially in the beginning when everything is going to be taking you a little longer because it's all new. So any help that you can have with that process is so welcome. And Riverside was really easy to use, very user-friendly. Like I said, very reasonably priced, and it did so much for me that it was a no-brainer for me. Then you get to the editing. Okay, great. I've recorded my episode. How am I going to make it worthy of going live to the world? Well, this was the step that I was most nervous about, and I thought would be by far the most time-consuming. Within this section, you don't only have the interview or that solo episode that you've recorded to edit, but you've also got, when you're listening to a podcast, if you think about it, they often have a little jingle in the beginning, and then they might have an intro, and then they have all of that again at the end. They have the exit, and then they have the jingle again. And I'd never done any editing really. So this was really nerve-wracking for me. I ended up going with Premiere Pro, Adobe software. It's actually a really intense software that definitely is overqualified for what I'm currently using it for. Like I said, I don't really do anything with the video at the moment. And being honest with you, one of the main reasons was because it's a lot easier to edit and cut audio, and it sound perfect, and you could never tell that it's been edited, than it is for video. So I decided in the beginning, when I'd recorded a couple of episodes and I was playing around with it, I was spending a lot of time and getting quite stressed by trying to make the video elements look good. And I realised it's a podcast. I don't need the video element. So I ditched that from my process. That's something I may well tackle in the future. But for now, the audio is the critical bit for me, and Premiere Pro is brilliant for that. But like I said, in Riverside, you can do light editing in there as well. And I also I don't over edit. So some people, they really, really go hard on the editing and they want it to be absolutely perfect. And that is amazing if you've got the time or the team or the energy to do that. I don't have those three things. And I also want it to be quite natural and organic. I want the laughter in there. I leave some of the ums and ahs in there. I do take out some. I know, especially for me, or this is a disclaimer actually, when you start podcasting, you notice how many times you say certain things. So I say, I think a lot, and I say and ah, and like. These are all words that actually I found that I used way too much. So I've been working on myself, trying to be more conscious about those things. But if I do feel like it's in there just a bit too much, I can edit some of them out. It's not a problem. And then finally, once you've done all of that, then you need to host it. You need a platform that can actually release it to the world. I've tried a couple through the process of having this podcast. I started on Kajabi. What's brilliant about it, and actually with all of the platforms that I've used, is that you publish it to there, but then that hosting platform shares it to everywhere else. So it shares it to Apple, it shares it to Spotify, all the other podcast websites that are out there. By you just doing that one upload, it sends it everywhere. So again, that was like a huge relief when I realized that it was going to take me a lot less time than I thought. I wasn't going to have to share it multiple times. I could just do it that one time. Kajabi was amazing, but I realized probably just over halfway through this podcast journey that I wasn't using it to its full advantage, and it's not the cheapest software. So I actually changed only for this season, for season 3, and I've gone on to Podbean. Podbean is much cheaper than Kajabi, and again, I upload it just the once. It shares it to everywhere. It can also which I don't know, Kajabi may well have done. So don't shoot me if I get this wrong, but Podbean will also share it onto my social media automatically for me on the day of release, which is amazing. There's also other elements to it that I can look at in the future when that's including advertising or other things. It gives you great statistics so you can really see how your podcast is doing. So these 4 things that I've, done through my journey make it a very simple process for me. When I've recorded an episode, it can take me 20 minutes, if that, to edit it, upload it, and get it ready for launch. So it really isn't that time consuming a process. The last thing I want to talk to you about is the monetization, because realistically, hello, we're a business. If you are wanting to add this new line to your business, it's got to be generating you money, right? Otherwise, what is the point? So there's, again, loads of different ways that you can bring money in through a podcast. Number 1, very obvious, sponsorship of the podcast. I get asked this a lot because I've actually had sponsorship from day one. So pre-launch, I already lined up a sponsor for the podcast. And apparently that's, quite rare in the podcasting world. I will tell you the difference of why I managed to get that in place and why other people don't. Purely confidence. I had the confidence to ask. I just approached a business that I knew had the same sort of values that I do, who would really resonate with the purpose of this podcast. And I had a conversation with them, said, it's a new podcast. We haven't released anything yet, so I've had no statistics. And actually, I think that's personally the best way to do it, because if you don't have any statistics to prove in the beginning, they can't question how successful the podcast is. So they're just buying into you and the idea of the podcast. I'm really proud to say that they have stayed the main sponsor of the podcast. We're into season 3 and they're still here. So I have to give a massive shout out to Xero. They really support the small business owner. They love what we're doing on this podcast and they're there to support you. And they've also given us a great offer, which is all detailed in the show notes for you. But I could have quite easily thought, well, no one's going to sponsor a podcast that hasn't launched yet, has 0 listeners. And I think that's what holds a lot of people back. So just ask the questions. My tips for this would be, though, make sure it makes sense. Don't just go and ask any businesses that you know, because it has to be a mutual relationship. It has to benefit them as well. They want to be getting in front of the right audience. So your audience, your ideal audience needs to line up. They need to have those same values, because otherwise it will start clashing and it won't be working for you. So put a lot of thought and effort into it. Make sure that you're asking the right people, and then just sell the dream, sell the purpose of the podcast, what it is that you're wanting to achieve. And if they say no, move on to the next one. Next is paid speakers. Now, I have never used this model on my podcast. Personally, it doesn't really align with what I'm wanting to achieve, but it's definitely a way of bringing in money if you wanted to use it. And that is having people pay to be on your podcast. I think this is something that some of the real, the bigger podcasts may do in their businesses when they have huge audiences, and it makes sense for them to ask. But for me personally, I don't think it will ever be something that I bring in. Like I said, doesn't really align with me, but it definitely is something that you can consider in your monetization of the podcast. Then you need to really make the most of the show notes. So make sure that you are advertising everything that you've got going on in your business right now. Make sure you add in links for your social media and for any sort of freebies and downloads that you offer. Showcase your business and what you've got to offer in the show notes. Put those links in, and then make sure that you're tracking them, because it's a really great way. And if you comment in the podcast episode, check out the show notes and this is there and that's there. It's a really great way to create some lead gen. And then finally, just start using metrics and asking when a new client comes to you or they've purchased something, how did you hear of us? Because I can guarantee that it will be bringing you in thousands of pounds worth of new leads and new business just because they've listened to a few of your episodes, really like your message. They've connected with you because they're hearing your voice and they like what you teach, and they've come into your world. So they might not buy directly from the podcast, but they've come into your world. They've discovered you through that podcast. So honestly, the monetization, the amount that you could generate is limitless. I'm just going to end this episode on some of the lessons that I've learned the hard way in this past year of having this podcast. Now, the first one really is that planning is critical. When I launched this podcast, I had a general idea. I knew what I was wanting to produce. I knew the purpose of the podcast, but I didn't really know how I was going to do it. I didn't build many things into my diary around it. I was like, I'll just release an episode every Wednesday. That would be great. You need to plan the time for recording the episode, for editing the episode, and for getting it uploaded, those sorts of things. And like I've said, it doesn't take much time, but it still needs to be planned into your diary. The next thing is to always be ahead of the game. This was critical for me, actually, and something I did right from the beginning, because I knew my time is really limited. I didn't have a lot of time that I could dedicate to this. And I couldn't face chasing my tail every week. That fills me with anxiety. And I knew that if I was going to do it and be consistent, I needed to always be ahead of the game. So when I released season 1, that first episode, I actually already had the entire season already recorded. I'd already done all of those interviews. That meant that I could spend the time, editing. I could get them all scheduled before I'd even release that first episode. And I didn't have to worry about it then. It was just about the marketing of it and creating the buzz around it. If I had to sit here today and think, oh my God, I've got to release an episode on Wednesday and I still haven't even recorded anything, that can be quite anxiety inducing. I need to make sure that I have things under control, and I've always got a bank of episodes that I've pre-recorded that I can fall back to and use to schedule. Something else that I didn't do in the beginning of my business was I didn't put it on Apple, because this is quite a painful process to get it set up on Apple. There's a lot of sort of forms you have to complete, and I get it. It's business and they need to make sure that the content they're releasing meets all of their guidelines. But I found it really, really confusing. And after spending ages trying to do it, I thought, well, it'll be fine without Apple for a bit. I'll put that off and I'll face that at another time, and I'll just have it on Spotify and the other platforms. So that's how I did it. And I think that might have actually been the whole of season 1 was just on Spotify, and it was working. People were listening to it. It was great. I didn't realize the impact that Apple would have. When I finally got round to tackling it and going through that painful process, the numbers of listeners absolutely skyrocketed. So I would say that yes, Apple is 100% worth it. Try and push through and get that done in the beginning. And then finally, just don't overcomplicate it. Don't worry. Don't try and do all of those amazing editing tricks that people do. Don't necessarily, if you don't want to do the video straight off, don't do it. Hold it back. Do the things that are going to create you a podcast in the simplest way in the beginning. As the podcast grows and your time and the money that it's generating grows, you can then invest more of your time and money into making it the next level. It doesn't need to be complicated in the beginning. So if you've ever thought of having a podcast for your business, let me know. Leave a comment on the bottom of this episode or drop me an email. I would love to hear what your idea is for a podcast. And if this episode has helped you at all with getting rid of any of that fear, getting rid of any of that overwhelm, and realizing that it is achievable for you and your business. I can't wait to hear you all on the airwaves soon. But for now, I will thank you all for joining us for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will speak to you all again soon. Take care. I hope you have enjoyed today's episode, which was brought to you by Xero Accounting Software, a champion of small businesses and a proud sponsor of the Bold Blueprint podcast. If you're running a small business and you are dreaming big, then Xero is here to help make those dreams a reality. Xero is all about supporting entrepreneurs just like you, who are not just running businesses but are also changing the game. So whether you're just starting out or you're scaling up, join a global community of small businesses who trust Xero to manage their finances efficiently.